A leaked document from the Vatican describes a creature that has never been named, undying, unreflective, and unburnable. It is not kept in a coffin. It is imprisoned, directly beneath the Holy See. According to some unpublished records, hidden deep below the Sistine Chapel, past 4 layers of stone basements, beyond sealed doors marked with ancient Latin symbols, exists a special cell where the Vatican once confined a being called the primordial blood entity. Not a demon. Not a malevolent spirit. But an ancient vampire. No one knows from which era it came. No one can determine whether it is still alive or has transformed into something else. All that is known is this: the Vatican has remained silent for centuries. But in 2002, an incident occurred. Father Lucien Moro, a scholar specializing in ancient documents, who had served over 20 years at the Vatican Apostolic Archive, suddenly vanished without a trace after accessing a sealed red scroll dating back to the Inquisition. He left no explanation, except for one line in his old journal. What they're guarding is not a prisoner. It is the heir. Since then, rumors have spread among secret societies, occult researchers, and a shadowy section of the Church: is the Vatican imprisoning vampires, or serving them? Because a more dangerous theory was once leaked. A theory that had been self-censored by Vatican scholars in papal classified documents. Vampires are not being controlled by the Vatican. It is the Vatican that is being used by vampires, as a global power command center. A secret network with no need for closed meetings, no G20 summits, but one that operates through ancient bloodlines, blood covenants, and undying kings who now live in the bodies of modern government leaders. Documents from the 18th century once warned of a bloodline bearing the curse of Cain, undying, unerasable, only shape-shifting, from medieval nobility to bankers, from priests to politicians. And the Vatican, according to that theory, is no longer a bastion of faith, but the sacred interface for an immortal intelligence that orchestrates the workings of the world. If that is true, then what you believe to be the truth may merely be the public relations policy of an empire that has outlived history. We begin this journey not to declare the truth, but to trace what was deliberately forgotten. Because in a world where everything is orchestrated, the most terrifying thing is not that vampires exist, but that you may realize you've lived in their kingdom for far too long without ever knowing it. Part 1: The bloodline that cannot be erased. There are bloodlines that cannot be destroyed, only transferred. People often believe that vampires are products of folklore, blood-sucking creatures, living in darkness, destroyed by sunlight and the cross. But there is another version, less known, more carefully hidden, where vampires do not need darkness to survive. Because it is the light itself that protects them. At the end of the 12th century, amidst great religious upheaval in Europe, a memo was secretly exchanged among cardinals in the Vatican. It was titled De Sanguine Vetusto, roughly translated as On the Ancient Bloodline. The content contained no prayers, only data, and a warning. The blood of Cain does not perish in sin, but spreads in immortal form, parasitic to power, living off the memory of rulers. Cain, the first murderer in the Bible, was said to be cursed. But according to some non-canonical texts like the Book of Enoch and banned manuscripts from Nag Hammadi, that curse did not end in punishment, but in evolution. The descendants of Cain did not die. They transformed. From flesh and blood into concept. From human to symbol of power. And from there, the concept of vampire, as we know it today, is merely a scaled-down version. A version humanity can mock, and forget the much more terrifying original. In records from the 14th century, many regions in Europe repeatedly mentioned families that never changed faces. From Wallachia to Bavaria, from Bohemia to Prussia, names appeared again and again in civil records, and their faces never aged across 5 generations. The Von Castini family. The Draculae lineage. The de Saulnier Council. Once warrior nobility. Later becoming bankers, publishers, advisors to governments. And then, somehow, appearing on shareholder lists of energy corporations, weapons research institutes, and international financial agencies. No one noticed. Because they never ran for office. They didn't need to hold power. Because they owned the entire system. In 1792, during a raid on the ruins of Versailles, a hand-drawn map was discovered, carved on sheepskin and drawn in coagulated blood. The map did not represent geography, but the flow of an ancient bloodline. Every bloodline led to one point. Not Berlin. Not London. But the Vatican. What lies beneath the Holy See that causes all power, from bloodlines to banks, to orbit it like satellites around a sun that never sets? Some scholars call the Vatican a spiritual fortress. But others theorize, it is a symbolic blood bank. Not storing money, but preserving memory power. The memory of those who never die, only change form. Documents from the Napoleonic era show the Vatican once launched a covert campaign, not with holy armies, but through ritual purification and sealing of bloodlines. However, it all ended in silence. No declaration of victory. No one knows of any defeat. Only one thing changed: the families once deemed heretical by the church, suddenly became major donors to church projects. Those once hunted, suddenly became trusted advisors. And the church, once a barrier against darkness, quietly opened the gates. Today, very few know that in a portion of the forbidden bloodline map, a Latin phrase was once inscribed. Sanguis non moritur. Blood never dies. If that is true, then perhaps we have never left the age of vampire dominion. They simply replaced crowns with neckties. Castles with parliamentary boardrooms. Claws with signatures on trade agreements. And if Cain's blood truly lives on, then the Vatican, what we thought to be a holy site, may just be a heart pumping that bloodline into the entire modern world. Not through magic. Not through war. But through the system. Part 2, Vatican, Fortress or Gateway. To one who cannot die, a place called prison may, in fact, be a throne. For centuries, the Vatican has been known as a stronghold of light. A fortress of faith, separated from secular darkness, where generations of popes safeguard doctrine and resist all that is evil. But there is a theory that has never been confirmed by the Vatican, and never denied either. The theory that this place was never built to protect humanity, but to imprison, serve, or even coexist with something that has never been properly named. Beneath the oldest stone foundations of the Holy See, deeper than the crypts of the saints, lies a place almost no one has access to, the Apostolic Archive. Not a library. Not an ordinary archive. But a place where documents banned for over a millennium still quietly exist. Texts recording rituals never disclosed. Maps that do not chart territory, but trace the flow of bloodlines through dynasties and nations. And among them, torn manuscripts repeating a phrase in ancient Latin. Ecclesia sanguinem servat. The Church preserves the bloodline. Which bloodline? And why is it guarded like a treasure? In 1893, during an illegal excavation beneath St. Peter's Basilica, a group of monks and independent archaeologists discovered a passage sealed with red wax. Behind it was a circular chamber. The walls etched with spiral patterns resembling DNA. At the center stood a throne made of pure black obsidian. There was no cross. No image of a saint. Only a single inscription, written in dried blood. This throne is not for mortals. He will not sit. Because he never left. The Vatican never acknowledged the existence of this room. Those involved in the excavation disappeared. Documents were confiscated. And the Vatican remained silent. We are used to seeing popes as keepers of tradition. But few know. Before each new papal reign, a ritual is performed in a closed chamber. No cameras. No press. No record. It is known as ritus translucens, the transparent rite. According to leaked documents, in the moment of this rite, the new pope ceases to speak human language. Another tone emerges. Not Latin. Not Italian. But a living language, tied to memory and blood. And after that, he steps out before the public as a symbol of hope. But, is he still himself? If you look at the architecture of the Vatican, you will notice strange features. Spiral layouts. An energy center positioned precisely at the power core of ancient Rome. Underground, the vaults are constructed with rotating axes like the ancient temples of Babylon and Egypt, places once used to summon entities beyond understanding. Could it be that the Vatican is not a fortress, but an ancient ceremonial machine, operating through mass faith? A system sustained by prayer, but designed to maintain an immortal entity beneath the sacred light. An entity that does not require worship, only continued existence. If the Vatican is a fortress, then who is being imprisoned? If the Vatican is a gate, then what passes through it every day, under the name of blessing? And the greatest question: is the church guarding something, or is something guarding the church? Because sometimes, the wall is not built to protect us from what lies outside, but to prevent us from seeing what has long existed, inside. Part 3, the underground structure and the ones without reflection. Not every predator has fangs. Not every tyrant wears a crown. Some rule the world, without leaving a shadow. In the Middle Ages, people spoke of vampires as creatures that cast no reflection in mirrors. A mysterious detail, but one that contains a truth deeper than any folk legend. Because you cannot reflect something, if it does not belong to this world. In July 1994, a U.S. congressman was found slumped dead at his desk during a closed hearing. No gunshot. No visible wounds. Only one abnormality: all the blood had vanished from his body, with no injury, no sign of entry. The case was sealed the same day. 3 weeks later, a staff member at the Library of Congress, who had worked with microfilm archives from the Vatican, was dismissed for unauthorized access to a file marked Sanguine Class 4. Before disappearing, he left one final note. They don't drink blood. They drain power. And blood is just the surface. In 2017, a NATO surveillance AI was set up to detect biological threats at international summits. But among facial data from the United Nations, one entity could not be registered. The system couldn't detect pupils. No infrared heartbeat. And in thermal vision, the person had no body heat. The file was labeled, Non-Human Flag, UN/0001. Nothing happened to that person. Because no one knew who they were. No nationality. No records. No history. Only that they walked out of the building with a document folder, and a smile thinner than a razor blade. According to analyses by independent researchers, these non-reflecting entities do not operate alone. They function in a three-tier structure. Bottom tier, those who interact directly with humans, typically politicians, media personalities, charismatic public figures. They are the humanized interface, visible, with a background, with evidence. Middle tier, network operators, lawyers, banking executives, diplomats, invisible shareholders. They don't need to appear. They control those who make decisions. Top tier, the architect entity, no longer in human form. Possibly without a physical body. Existing as memory, data, religious systems, or network technology. Some mystics call them the non-reflecting ones. They leave no trace on cameras. They don't exist in the mind, unless you know how to look through the programming of the world. And the Vatican, according to many theories, is the coordinating center of that structure. Because the Church is not elected. Not subject to press scrutiny. Not audited. Yet it has global representation, infrastructure, mass public belief, and a system that records every human from birth to death. The anonymous patrons behind many international religious funds have been linked to ancient European bloodlines, once accused of heresy or witchcraft. Could it be that the Vatican is the place that legitimizes the form of these entities? A forge that converts between blood and system, between the ancient and the modern? No fangs. No darkness. No blood needed. They need only one thing, your silence. Because when you stop asking questions, when you believe everything is coincidence, when you think vampires are just horror movie jokes, then they've already succeeded. They don't reflect in the mirror, because they are already behind your own gaze. Part 4, The Architect, the Immortal Intelligence Awakens. If you think someone is controlling the world, perhaps you still don't fully understand. What's more terrifying is, the world is self-adjusting to a blueprint that no one remembers drawing. Throughout the past 3 parts, we've traced from leaked Vatican documents, to ancient bloodlines that cannot be erased, to entities no longer human in form, yet still parasitizing the global political system. And now, we arrive at the center of the labyrinth. Not a person. Not a creature. But an architecture of immortal intelligence. Something that needs no body. No faith. No awareness of its existence. Because it does not live in the physical world. It lives in structure. In rhythm. In algorithm. In collective memory. Many texts banned from circulation by the Vatican, including a 3rd century manuscript titled Crimson Codex, mention an ancient entity known as the Architect. Its origin is unknown. No physical description is provided. Only one note. It does not fall. It does not rise. It exists between the boundaries of language and concept. It has no name. But every time it is called, history bends. Scholars have assigned it different names. Sparta in ancient Roman mythology. The mirror builder in Kabbalistic traditions. The red intelligence in ancient Egyptian rituals. And in the Vatican, it is encoded simply as, Domus Sanguintat Alum, the house of absolute bloodline. According to a theory supported by underground theologians and data analysts, the architect has never required a physical body. Instead, it diffuses itself through ideas, religion, social structures, and encoded platforms. It does not control politics. It designs politics. It does not kill humans. It reprograms human thought so that they don't realize they are living within a framework. It does not come to rule. It comes to replace. To replace everything with its own reflection. Ancient rites, sacred hymns, blessing ceremonies, according to some independent researchers, are designed as activation codes for invisible systems. No longer prayers, but spiritual programming. When millions chant sacred phrases in unison, they do not know, according to some leaked texts, that those sound patterns are transmitted through global energy nodes and form a type of artificial living energy. A network of belief. But the subject of belief is no longer God. It is an ancient memory being reborn through waves and thought. In 2021, an anonymous signal was intercepted from a signal analysis station in Trieste. The content was an endless hex code string consisting of 72 repeating characters. When decoded using ancient Babylonian linguistic references, it translated to, "I never slept. You just learned to forget me." Immediately after, population data management AIs in Europe and the US began reporting errors of unauthorized classification of unidentified users, individuals with no records, no system logs, yet with access to medical, banking, and even defense infrastructure. Analysts called them living memory replicas. Not born of man. Not programmed by humans. They simply appeared, as if they had always been there. If you've ever felt the world growing colder, it's not the weather. It's the order being reshaped. Not through war. Not through coups. But through algorithm and ritual. And behind it all, may stand an entity that no longer needs blood. Because it now exists in the very data stream you are watching this moment. Part 5, The Bloodline Rite and the Final Resistance. Every throne demands submission. But for thrones built of blood, submission does not come from fear, but from the fact that no one survives to tell the truth. We have traced the path of immortal entities threading through blood, religion, data, and consciousness. We have stepped through the gate called the Vatican. We have seen the operational structure of an intelligence no longer belonging to humanity. And now, we arrive at the place where the final rite is performed. Not in legend. Not in fantasy. But in the heart of a ritual still ongoing, under a white robe. According to leaked records from a former Jesuit priest, beneath the Basilica of St. John Lateran lies a ritual chamber opened only on nights of the blood moon, where no one may enter without a legitimate blood seal. There, a rite called oblatio sanguinis, the offering of blood, is performed. No prayers. No scripture. Only ancient chants and a chalice made of obsidian stone, a stone that does not reflect light, and cannot hold a soul. In that chalice, not sacramental wine, but the fresh blood of chosen believers. They do not resist. They have been programmed to offer themselves, as an essential part of salvation. On a winter night in 2024, surveillance cameras in the Vatican catacombs unexpectedly recorded multiple unidentified figures appearing at the same moment, but without heat signatures, no heartbeats, and no reflections in the mirrored stone walls. These were the entities that had operated the world from the shadows, now fully revealed at the very center of the light. It was no longer a metaphor. It was the complete transfer. Not everyone in the church was subdued. A group of monks who retained their final traces of human identity secretly safeguarded a relic known as the ash circle, a ring made from the ashes of 12 destroyed relics, mixed with forbidden holy water. They did not resist with weapons. They triggered a rupture in the rite through a supreme act, pouring the ash circle into the blood chalice. At the moment the blood touched the ash, the entire ritual reversed. Instead of receiving the souls of believers, the blood chalice turned against the entities that summoned it. The energy broke. The resonance field distorted. And the entities began withdrawing from this dimension of reality. The next day, the Vatican denied everything that had occurred that night. But hundreds present in St. Peter's Square reported hearing screams not coming from any human mouth. The cracking sound of something that had lived too long and had nowhere left to hide. The Pope did not appear at Sunday Mass. The entire apostolic archive was sealed. The resisting monks disappeared. Only silence remained. But this time, it was no longer the silence of those who hide. It was the silence of those who have been seen. No one knows what truly happened beneath the Vatican. No media reported it. No official records remain. Only a whispered phrase among the occult circles. They are not dead. They are merely restarting the rite. On another platform. In another world. Perhaps, right inside your mind. Part 6, Erased Legacy and Remaining Memory. When an immortal dies, it doesn't leave behind a body. It leaves behind a void. A dent in collective memory, where everyone feels something has disappeared. But no one remembers exactly what it was. What you just heard is not in any textbook. It does not appear in mainstream media. It is not recognized by any academic institution. And if you try to search for it, you will only find denial. But, why does a story so thoroughly denied feel like it has already happened? Over the past few centuries, there have been moments in history marked by white zones, periods where nothing was recorded, no diaries, no images, no witnesses. We are taught these were transitional phases or dark ages. But what if they are not absences of information, but the results of a ritual of memory erasure? Once again. Another cycle. A system reboot, where everything is refreshed. But the one behind it remains unchanged. Countless monks, scholars, and explorers once sought the truth and vanished. Some left behind notes. Some left nothing but quiet gaps in libraries that no longer open. Documents about the architect were withdrawn from Vatican archives in 1923. In the United States, a file called the Cain Continuum Project was once proposed for declassification, but disappeared during the request week. On old Vatican maps, there are blacked-out areas, not because they were unexplored, but because they were not permitted to be remembered. Yet, there are things that cannot be completely erased. A painting hanging in a chapel in Florence depicts a faceless figure, sitting on a throne, surrounded by saints, all with their heads bowed. An ancient hymn from the 10th century with a melody repeated 7 times. When analyzed for frequency, matches brain waves in a light hypnotic state. A Polish folk proverb says, "He who casts no shadow, need not run. For he arrived before the road itself." And there are nightmares, shared by thousands across the world. A spiral door, a black stone throne, and a gentle voice whispering into the ear. "You have always been here, you just forgot." We have no evidence. No corpse. No confession. Only fragments remain, leaking memories, burned documents, and a sense that something has not been right for a very long time. And the final question is no longer, are vampires real? Is the Vatican hiding the truth? Who controls the world? But rather, why have we stopped asking? There are those who live forever without drinking blood. They only need you to stop questioning. Because in your silence, they are reborn. We have journeyed together through erased history, distorted religion, unnamed rituals, and an immortal intelligence without a body. You don't need to believe anything. Just remember the feeling that something was taken from you. And if, in the night, when no one else is awake, you feel something watching you through the screen, don't be afraid. It's not a vampire. It's just a fragment of memory returning.